I'm here today to talk about Femtech and the trends we see in the space. We've all seen the headlines generated by Femtech and the investment estimates highlighting the massive potential in the space. Judging from this, we've come far from the days in 2016 when Ida Tin, the Glue's co-founder, famously coined the term Femtech to describe companies that are catering to women's health. But how's the Femtech industry really doing in Europe? And where do the best opportunities lie? I work as an investment analyst at Maki.vc, a seed fund investing in deep tech and brand-driven companies across consumer and enterprise spaces. We map the field of Femtech relentlessly, and I'm super excited to be here today to talk about how we view the space. I'll walk you through 4 main categories where we see potential in, and I finish by discussing the potential areas that we have identified. But first, let's get everyone on the same page on how massive the Femtech opportunity really is. Like already mentioned, the total addressable market for Femtech is over half of the world's population. Secondly, we have vast amounts of scientific and technological debt when it comes to female health. It's always been underfunded, underserved, under-researched, and there's a huge lack of innovation. It's crazy to think how far technology has come from, let's say, the 1960s, with smartphones and internet, but the science of women's bodies has barely progressed at all. The time is ripe to bridge this gap and build technology and products that really cater to women. Globally, the Femtech market is expected to grow at a 16% compound annual growth rate, up to 2027, reaching a market value of $65 billion. Global investments into Femtech moved from 407 million in 2017 to 2.5 billion euros in 2021. In 2020, we saw a slight decrease in investments, but that was mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in 2022, this year, we've already seen 800 million invested so far. We've already seen a lot of things in the US market, but Europe is really lagging behind. So what are the general overarching trends in Femtech? For decades, women's health has really been conflated with reproductive health, but the attitudes are changing, and we're moving towards a more holistic picture of women's health. This is also propelled forward by the widespread adoption of the telehealth and digital therapeutics that we saw increases in during the pandemic. Also, a huge thing in Femtech is the destigmatization, because women's bodies or women's health has not been okay to talk about previously. So kind of building communities where you can share in peace kind of the struggles that you might have with your body. When looking at the average life cycle of a perfectly healthy European woman, we see a vast array of opportunities for Femtech mainstream products. This is an oversimplistic picture, and it's making a lot of assumptions. For instance, not everyone can or wants to have children. But essentially, what we're talking about here is when period starts to managing menopause or postmenopausal issues. Next, I'll open up 4 areas within this life cycle and cover example companies as well as categories and the funding data behind these. These 4 categories are reproductive health and fertility, menopause, postpartum and parenting, and lastly, sex tech. So starting with reproductive health and fertility, it is definitely the most established area within Femtech. To summarize some of the overarching trends, we all know that women are having children later in their lives, and the mean age in Europe in 2020 was 29.5 years. This reflects a wider trend where people or women want to have a more holistic picture of their reproductive health because they're having kids later on, and require solutions that are safer, more holistic, and more personalized. Secondly, women today are more and more aware of the role that hormones play in their lives, causing, for instance, the most common contraceptive, the pill, to go down in its popularity. But luckily, new innovations are emerging. Thirdly, as a growing number of people are experiencing trouble conceiving, the market for fertility services continues to grow. And we've also seen a lot of kind of at-home solutions cater to this need. We've roughly divided the companies in this area into 4 pockets. Starting from contraception, we have companies like London-based Tune, who help women better understand their hormonal balance and create a personalized pill. Then we have Danish UI, who are creating a hormonal capsule for women. Moving on to the pregnancy category, we have companies like Keleya, who offer personalized training and nutrition services for women. And then we have Pregnolia, who do measurement tests to understand the risks for premature birth. The testing fertility and treating infertility is definitely the most well-trodden area here. And we have companies like Bia Fertility that brings actually the fertility treatment home, and Levi Health, who have developed a very fast fertility test that you can do, and then a personalized treatment plan to follow. Then maybe the most recent things we've seen in the space is the access to fertility services. So we have companies like Gaia, who offer personalized IVF succession and insurance for IVF. And employers also enter the picture here. We have Berlin-based Oviavo, who is doing egg freezing through employee benefits, and Pepi, on the other hand, is doing everything related to women's health through employee benefits. When looking at the funding data, we estimate that around 300 million euros have been invested into European startups working with reproductive health and fertility in Europe. During most years shown here, the funding has exceeded 20 million, making it the most mature category in the space. There's also been big series B rounds with, for instance, Natural Cycles that you may know of. And we're again seeing an upward trend here after the 2020 slump to kind of increase the funding. So by the first half of this year, already saw almost record funding in the space. What's noteworthy here that we haven't really seen a lot of exits yet, albeit for Opsiva's IPO and an acquisition of Phoenix Biotech and Ava in 2022. These have been left out of here to avoid skewing the data. Then let's diving into menopause. It's defined as the end of a woman's menstrual cycle, and it's diagnosed after a woman has gone through 12 months without a menstrual period. Looking at the trends, menopause has really been thought of as a singular condition to treat rather than a set of holistically kind of important health attributes. And one obvious trend here is that there is a massive big data opportunity for companies that harness the data and are able to build feedback loops to make better products. Secondly, as already discussed, the hormonal side in the reproductive health and fertility, 93% of women are interested in non-invasive tech solutions. So today, the most common treatment is the hormonal replacement therapy, but it is still a hit and miss, kind of like the pill. So this approach can also cause side effects. So we're exploring what could be the next solution here. And thirdly, as in many other areas of female health, demystifying and destigmatization of menopause is really a huge issue and kind of a community-driven effort. So we've divided the companies here into 2 categories, so products to tackle menopause and digital therapeutics. In the products to tackle menopause, we have, for instance, Grace Cooling, who are developing a bracelet that sends cooling sensations to your body, or Mona, that have a cooling pillow to regulate your body temperature while you sleep. Also, Empowder is making supplements for your perimenopause and menopause to be able to kind of affect it that way. Then we have digital therapeutics, and here we have divided this into 2. So we have companies like Vira, who are solely focused on menopause and treating the kind of the menopause journey. And then we have overall women's health companies who are kind of looking at the whole life cycle. The menopause funding in Europe is still quite modest. While there are a dozen VC-backed menopause companies in Europe, they're all still really early, and most having only raised their first funding rounds. Aside from Candy Therapeutics, raising a 30 million Series C, as you can see here, in 2018, and subsequently they were actually acquired by Bayer for 400 million, the number of rounds have really not translated into high funding figures. And these figures will obviously grow when these companies that have raised the first rounds will go on and raise follow-on rounds, such as Vira Health earlier did this year with their 10 million plus round. we expect other companies will follow in the next 12 months. Then moving on to postpartum and parenting. This is really booming in the United States, and Forbes estimates that the new mom economy is a $46 billion market. This is largely driven by the millennial moms and their new expectations on what parenting should be like. And these expectations really do include technology. These technologies, or these kind of how this shows in their lives, is that they want to build communities where they share their struggles, best practices, but then also they're really used to purchasing products from marketplaces, for instance, food, clothing, and beyond. We've seen some increases in the funding as well, but these kind of taller blocks here are really driven by the by individual companies like LV, the breastfeeding and pelvic floor training companies, £58 million series or funding round last year. However, the lines here are also blurry, as we saw the pregnancy category, so they're obviously trying to expand to the postpartum and better their life cycle that way. We also see a lot of very different companies in the space. So we have the LV, but then we also have Korukits, who are matching nannies and busy parents. So it's a very wide array of products and services. Then, lastly, sex tech. Looking at the overarching trends, we're really seeing the democratization and growing social acceptance of especially female sexual pleasure and well-being. So millennials, millennial and Gen Z women really see pleasure as a necessity and as an element of self-care rather than luxury. To add to this, we know one thing that is COVID-proof, and that's sex. So companies saw really increases in sales during the pandemic. Also, 1/3 of Gen Z say that they have a friend who uses a gender-neutral pronoun. So we need to really also cater to kind of the more inclusive offering of sex tech solutions. From the funding data, it is quite difficult to really say, to give any thorough conclusions. But what we see here is that the funding has increased slowly, and then we have identified 4 categories that we're keeping an eye on. So dating apps and relationships, sexual health, sex toys, sexual wellness, and education. So what does the future hold for Femtech? The pace is really increasing, especially globally. The past years have seen 2 unicorns, the 2 very first unicorns in the Femtech space, both in the US, that is proving to be a really forerunner in Femtech. Maven Clinic last year, and then Kindbody this year. But a lot of the companies we talked about are really in their early stages. We're starting to see increased interest from big brands and established companies that want to collaborate with Femtech companies. And this is really maybe to have a data angle, to complement the big company's current offering, and obviously for startups it's a great distribution, or it can be a great distribution channel. Also, the exit paths are materializing when big players are moving into space and understand that they really don't understand female health, or they really lack the services to cater to female health. So what we're keen to see in Femtech next. So harnessing your hormones, we really need to find solutions to cater to kind of more holistic understanding of hormones, and maybe match that with unique cycle, hormonal fluctuations for increased well-being, productivity, and creativity. Then we need to kind of look beyond the perfectly healthy woman. So, for instance, specific conditions like endometriosis affect every 10th woman. So we need to find ways to diagnose and to treat these very under-researched issues. And then we need to cater to underrepresented groups, such as women of color. Also, longevity is a very hot space in the US, and increasingly so also in Europe. Imagine if we could diagnose perimenopause, that happens before menopause, earlier, and perhaps intervene and so slow the progress down. Not to mention other products for future postmenopausal women that could help them live a better, a few more quality-adjusted years. That's it. Thank you. I know this was quite a lot of information packed into 20 minutes. I'll keep on mapping the Femtech space and its kind of overarching trends, and I'm always happy to chat with investors and founders in the area. So if you share interest towards Femtech, please do reach out.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few questions for you coming from the public. Let's start from what's the ratio of of men and women in the Femtech industry?
Oh wow, I don't have the numbers with me here, but I would say a lot of the Femtech founders that I've met are women, and I think that's also kind of profiling to be so. So what I'd like to personally see, I for instance just talked to a friend who wants to build a company, and he said that I can't build a Femtech company because I don't understand it, and I think that's part of the problem. So we need to also kind of encourage men to really solve these problems.
Okay. And on the same topic, why is Femtech, I read it as it is, why is Femtech so much less talked about than FinTech, MarTech, and other industries, for example? Is it just a smaller area, or is there some kind of a shame about it, or some, what do you think?
Well, if you look at the total addressable market, it really isn't a small area. So I think it's part of what you mentioned, so shame, it's very stigmatized, no one really wants to talk about it. And then if we look at the investors as well, so Clue's co-founder Ida Tin has multiple times said that what is it like to pitch a period tracking app to white men? so they might not understand the problem, they might not understand the need for the solution. So obviously there's also the investor point of view in that. But also, it's maybe to add to that, it's also a very nascent, so it hasn't been around, unfortunately, for that long, and that's why we don't have enough data on it to build on.
Okay, so apparently you're doing a great job because we have some messages coming in. Petra, you're awesome. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
But more questions as well. What products would you like to use in the future as a woman?
I think something to more holistically understand, like mentioned here, so holistically understand my own hormones, my own hormonal balance, and then also the contraception that comes with it. So what really works for my body? So now I go to the doctors and they have a different set of things but they're not really personalized. So something really personalized I would like to see.
Let's see, we have the time for one more. Is sex education / intimacy consultation tech attractive for investors, or they think it cannot compete with professional therapists?
I think it really depends. So I think we've seen some of those companies as well. Like mentioned, sex tech is really in its early stages, so I think there's a lot of innovation. So if you think of building a company in that space, do reach out. But I see value in both. So I think there can be some digital channels where we can find solutions more quicker, catering to more audiences, and then the other side is the person-on-person interaction. So we can't forget that either.
Where have you invested this year, if you can say that, or no, of course?
Yeah, so we actually, this year, in the Femtech space, I think this was already last year actually, but we've invested in Genis. So it's actually matching your hormonal cycle or your menstrual cycle with your training, offering you personalized training for that. So we invested in that last year. So it's a company from Jessica Ennis-Hill. So it's a really cool one. But it's in the early stages, so a lot of exciting development still ahead.
Awesome. Petra, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please, a big round of applause.